Right. Oh, what episode is it? 116. Okie dokie. And this is going to go out. Ooh, Christmas Day is going to be a Sunday as well. So I'm doing some mental, struggling with some mental thinking here. But this is presumably the penultimate episode before the Christmas Day one. That's if we do it, if we can manage to do a Christmas Day one. But hopefully, if that's the case, that will be filmed next week. So yes, a lot of blathering, but this is the penultimate episode before Christmas Day. So I'm going to start with a good old Roundstone coffee in a Retropower mug. Now there probably isn't time. Normally I say plenty of time to get these ordered before Christmas. Royal Mail, mainly due to the strike action, is a little bit sketchy at the minute. What they were saying was, I think the last post for Christmas delivery is Monday. So yeah, that probably does mean you could potentially get one of these in time for Christmas still. So yes, go in the shop, lots of mugs, etc. Right, I'm going to start with Land Cruiser. So last week? No, it was this week. I've been doing the PDM programming on that. So we installed the wiring loom a while ago. Bobby beavered away on that a few weeks back. It's just been waiting for me to get on and actually do the programming. So we bang on a bit about PDM electronics. The vast majority of the cars we're building these days are PDM based electronics. So rather than having a fuse and relay box, there's a power distribution module, which is like an ECU. And basically you have a battery voltage connection to that, inputs from all the switchgear, outputs to all the components, and you basically program how you want that to operate. So I did the program for that Tuesday, I think it was, and yeah, it went really well. So first power up electrically, went through everything, a few little tweaks to do. I think there was only one wiring mistake, which was on the heater aircon unit. We kind of consolidated down the little sort of sub harness that comes with that, weeded out a lot of the stuff we didn't need, and I made one error in that I didn't realise that inside all the insulating tape on that original harness there was a splice rather than just a wire going straight through. So I had a dead end wire in there, so there was no power feed to it basically. So I've sorted that out pretty quickly. But other than that, yeah, all looking really good. And although it's a simple car, some of the details are quite cool. So the Dakota digital dash now, although it looks like a standard Land Cruiser dash, it's actually got a little LCD display on it, so you can scroll through menus and things on that. And some of the other programming details we've done are sort of subtle changes from standard. So for instance, normally the stalk does you push away, pull towards, kind of click for switching between main beam, dip beam. And we wanted to basically make that a momentary switch, so we blocked the push away. There's a flash function on it as well, but we wanted to use that for screen wash. So we blocked the sort of push away, pull towards, and did a dual function programming through the PDM. So you hold it for screen wash and you flick it to toggle between main and dip beam on the headlights. But you have to block the away, because obviously if you still had push away for the main beam, you'd have to dip your lights to get to the screen wash. So a long-winded way of explaining that, but that's how that is. Yeah, so electrically powered up, all gone well, and then the owner came over for, I think it might be the first time since we started it, to be fair. It might have been once more, but I have a feeling it's actually the first time he's been since we started the project. Yeah, so he had a good look around it, really happy. I'd say we're a couple of months away probably from completing that now. And he turned up in, and this is just summarises how generally awesome our customers are. He turned up in what was basically just a dirty, battered around, daily driven Lancia Delta Integrale Evo 2. So yeah, very cool sort of transport to get up here. And true to Lancia reputation, it had a breakdown. Basically the clutch started to fail towards the end of the trip up here. So he was having to frantically pump the clutch to try and get anything, and most of the time couldn't disengage the clutch at all, which made the last 10 miles of his journey quite exciting. But we were able, no better place to break down than here, so we were able to fix it. It essentially seemed to be just lack of maintenance, that the clutch fluid was absolutely filthy. And I think it was, there was some dirt caught down the side of the seal, so the seal wasn't really sealing properly in the master cylinder. So we kind of flushed it all out, changed the fluid, and it solved it. I mean, whether it might need a replacement cylinder at some point soon, I don't know, but it certainly got him home, so that was good. So yeah, that's Land Cruiser, NSU. I'm so used to just standing here and talking about everything because it's been so crowded. I've forgotten almost that we normally walk around. So we will in a sec. NSU, we were waiting on the top mounts. Now eventually, I was told by the customer that there was somebody in Germany who was doing reproduction ones. Now, after a long wait, he's now come back to me and said that there isn't. There was already some discussion a while ago about adapting E30 3 Series ones to work, which I'd been shown on some NSU thread quite a while ago when we were previously working on this car. So we've gone back to plan A basically, which we've been able to execute very quickly, of doing these adapted E30 top mounts with a modified sort of sleeve under the nut to sleeve it to the correct size for the NSU strut. So very quickly we've got those together now. I'm just waiting on the wheel bolts actually, which we'd forgotten that we didn't have for this. Tyres are now fitted to the wheels, which are down there. They must be the highest profile, narrowest tyres ever to grace our workshop, I would say. So as soon as those wheel bolts are here, that's going to be rolling. The owner's bringing the door seals up on Saturday, so we can get that sealed up. Going to get the windscreen in, sunroof in, and that is essentially the point at which that will be leaving us as a sealed rolling shell. So I'm going to enjoy the space of the workshop, and obviously the reason I can do this is because the Cortina and the Project Utah Jag left us again. So they were up here temporarily after the NEC show. We were doing some work on them, but we got through all of that anyway. So they've now left us, and we've got a little bit of space, and I suspect quite soon we're going to have a fair bit more, because with the NSU imminently going, the Mustang I'll cover in a minute, but that's imminently going, and the Mercedes over there imminently going, we should have a lot more space. Anyway, for the moment, Morris, we've been mainly on with the grille design. So we've been wanting to make the bezel that sits around the radiator grille for that. And I wanted to do a 3D scan. So George has now done a 3D scan of the front. He's been drawing that up on CAD. We've kept it really simple, just done a 2D plasma cut aluminium surround around the grille. And we're going to bond on some little studs on little mounting plates on the back of that grille surround. So that's been made. That's just gone away for anodizing with a load of other bits. When that's back, we'll be able to try that on there and bond the mesh into it. So all good on that. The Manta, I'm waiting still on the titanium bolts for the wheels. I've had the samples sent from the owner, confirmed what we're going for, so we're ready to do that. So I'm just waiting for basically the batch of bolts to be sent by him so we can carry on. Jamie, if you could thread your way through this narrow gap, I think we could go into this area and swing a cat for a bit. So EType, actually loads of progress going on this. It's just mainly parts restoration and ordering and basically gathering everything together on the shelves upstairs. Lots of new parts, everything being organised into bins according to what area of the car they go onto. Things like window regulators, glass, lights, switches, lots of new parts, and then also some parts that we're restoring the originals. So we've stripped and repainted things like the expansion tank, which is quite a nice kind of formed brass, so is it brass? Yeah, I think it is brass, tank. Things like that, the vacuum accumulator tank, there's various pipes. Actually, one thing I really like about the EType is we often spend a lot of time when we're doing the resto mod type projects neatening up engine bay plumbing, and that can often be a nice way of routing plumbing from one side of the engine bay to the other without sprawling pipes everywhere. And one of the ways we often do that is actually to go inside. So sometimes when we're doing brake plumbing, for instance, we'll actually go in from one side of the car through the inside of the bulkhead and back out again, so it looks really neat. And I really like the way the EType has these kind of formed hard lines with little riveting flanges. that take the plumbing for vacuum and water from one side of the engine bay in through the scuttle and back out the other. It's very neat. It's actually how we would go about trying to tidy an engine bay up, which where on most of the cars we deal with, they don't look that tidy. So, you know, hats off to Jaguar. There's a lot of very nice design on those cars. So yeah, basically gathering parts together, ready for a big push to start the reassembly progress. Mustang, so finally, there's a lot of things come together after, it actually felt like last week we were just banging our heads against a wall all the time with everything not going to plan. In terms of other people not getting parts here on time, damaging parts, so like the wheels on the Mustang. But this week everything's come together pretty well. So the wheels that I've been waiting for this finally arrived. I would imagine I'm probably the first person in this country to get a set of these exact wheels, although they are a replica of, you know, basically they're a Halley brand replica. But this batch was the first batch in to Northants Tyres, who are kind of the main distributor of American style and brands of wheel in this country. And we would have almost certainly had the first set. And yeah, really happy with them. They're exactly the look that I wanted. We were going to refurb the original wheels that are on it to give it more or less this look. So yeah, it's all's well that ends well, essentially. They look good. We've done a small modification on those spinners that are on there. Obviously they don't actually hold the wheels on because they're still a 5-bolt pattern, but one slight concern we had is that they basically spin onto a threaded sleeve that goes in the back of the wheel, and there's a step on it to stop that sleeve falling all the way through the centre bore. And I was a little bit worried, or we all were, that there's nothing really to stop those spinners coming loose. And also, if the threads get corroded, the whole thing spinning with the bit at the back would potentially be an issue as well. Now, we haven't addressed the latter, but the issue of the spinner potentially just coming undone, we have. So we've cross-drilled the spinner part and put grub screws in, and then to stop that grub screw damaging the thread and then making it almost impossible to wind the spinner off the spigot without the spigot just spinning, we've basically machined the threads back off the end of that spigot, so the thread starts behind the grub screw, so the grub screw's basically screwing into a plain part on there. So that was just a little modification, just to be a bit more peace of mind that those spinners couldn't just fly off while you were driving along. But yeah, other than that, we're now ready test driving on that. The boot carpet turned up from Dean this week as well. That looks good, that's all in place. So yeah, we are literally just now test driving. Unfortunately, the roads are not conducive to that at the moment because it's been somewhere between -4 and -7 every night for about the last probably 10 days, I'd say. And the roads out here are horrible, covered in salt. There's mud everywhere around here because we're in quite a rural area. So yeah, not ideal for test driving, but we are at that point. I'm going to squeeze through this way. Camaro. John's been carrying on plumbing. I think he's about done with the fuel plumbing now. Pressure regulators mounted, the fuel lines are run, and he's been moving forward with the oil plumbing. I think I mentioned before, it's got a hydraulic booster on it, brake booster on it, so the brake boosting is done via the pressure generated from the power steering pump rather than vacuum. And we're putting a cooler in that system because that hydraulic pump's now doing the steering and the brake boosting. We wanted to get a cooler in there just to make sure there was no issues with oil temperature. So we're doing a vertically mounted 10-row Mocal cooler at the sort of near side of the radiator. Unions pointing towards the side of the car, so we can get really neat plumbing. The input kind of comes around this sort of chassis at the front to the lower connection. The upper one will literally come straight out and 90 degrees straight into the top of what will be our fabricated reservoir for that. So all the plumbing is going to look super neat for that, and John's just working through getting that all mocked up, getting the hoses ready to be crimped. Yeah, so it's exciting that, you know, we were pretty much there brake plumbing wise, steering plumbing, booster hydraulic plumbing, fuel plumbing. I think probably next we'll look at the water plumbing for the heater and the aircon refrigerant lines. But yeah, we're making good progress on that. Wander over here, I think that's pretty much, I walked past it, but Project Kaiser over there, the Mercedes, we've been waiting for the machined knobs for the dash, which were machined in brass, and the sort of straight moulding I talked about last week. Frustratingly, I talked about Royal Mail earlier. We've been trying to send stuff special delivery in the hope that it still arrives next day, but those bits were sent special delivery, and I think they took something like 8 days, 9 days to get here. Might even have been more than that, which was rather frustrating. I was very relieved that they did get here because those parts were in a package from my machinist, which comprised in total quite a lot of money's worth of stuff. So glad that they got here in the end, and then they've been shipped straight out to Derby Plating, who are trying to do a super fast turnaround for me on those bits to get them chromed, because I really want to try and get that dash done, buttoned up, all the chrome work in, and the car basically ready to go again before Christmas. So fingers crossed they pull through on the chrome work. I'm just glancing over at the Lancia out of the corner of my eye, just wondering whether we'd done some more. Yes, the mould for the front louver panel is done. KS Composites have been doing that, so that's been machined, and they're just about to start laying up that front panel. So that's in progress, and then the rear, I think I might have mentioned this last week, but the rear light surrounds, they're in progress. They're being 3D printed in nylon, so they're in progress at the minute as well. So yeah, hopefully, maybe next week, maybe before Christmas, we'll have the louver panel and the rear light surrounds and the flank vents all through for that, at which point we're really cooking on gas, as they say with that. And on that note, I'll hand over to Nat and see what's been going on in the metal shop. We will see you next time on Christmas Day. See you then.
Land Cruiser exhaust.
And just to add, Land Cruiser exhaust. Jamie said to me at the beginning of this, the one thing he'd got loads of footage of was the Land Cruiser exhaust, and it's the one thing I forgot to talk about at all. So James was on with fabrication of their Land Cruiser exhaust system, so they've basically got as far as the downpipes, the awkward bit as he calls it, which is very true, where it threads quite close down between the gearbox and the prop shaft on one side. And actually, speaking of the prop shaft, we had the prop shafts delivered yesterday as well. So prop shafts are ready to go on, which we were hoping for, and James was hoping for, before he absolutely finalised the exhaust and finished it, because it's quite close on some of the prop shaft. So yeah, prop shafts are here. All of the front sections have been welded up. Scott was doing that. Actually, that's just reminded me of something else, is that he'd done something which he's been meaning to do for ages, which is make some 3D printed bungs, tapered bungs that we can put in the end of stainless tube with a small hole in the middle for a pipe, so we can gas purge the inside of those tubes. Generally speaking, in the past, we've always done it, but we use a bit of foil tape over the end and just poke the pipe through. But we've made some proper little 3D printed bungs now, so we can gas purge the inside of those tubes when TIG welding them. It just basically makes the weld a lot neater. There's a bit of science behind that. I'm sure maybe at some point we'll do an autofocus, which Nat will no doubt have to take over on, about some TIG welding techniques, when we can talk a bit more about gas purging, etc. Anyway, exhaust done, blah, blah, blah. Hand over to Nat. This is what's going on in the metal workshop. Christmas soon, blah, blah, blah.
Right, well, hello folks, and welcome to another episode of Retropower Uncut from the Fabrication workshop. And we've got lots going on, as always, so we're going to start off with Project Kumar Mark 1 Escort. The metalwork tide is gradually coming to the back of the car, and we've actually, temporarily at least, reached the inside of the back panel with the boot floor. So Sam's been working on this, and Tom's been doing some work, but we'll pick up on what Tom's been doing in a moment on further forward on the car. Sam's been working on the back, getting the over-axle section of the boot floor sorted out. If I sound a bit strange, I've had a bit of a cold, so I've got a bit of a cough and you know, the usual aftermath of a cold. So yeah, that's why I'm sounding a bit strange. But anyway, yeah, he's been working on getting the boot floor over the axle area, doing the step section in the rear of that, with the point where the drop well section of the fuel tank is accommodated. I think I mentioned that last week, talking about the anti-surge provision on the tank. Scott had done that on the other car. Sam's now copied what Scott had done. We drew the recess on CAD so that we could make an exact copy of it readily for this car. So those bits have been done. Sam's been getting on and getting all that turned into finished parts and getting that welded in. That's now all tacked in. There's bits of further welding, all the spot welding's done. It's tacked in place. There's a bit of further welding to finish that off. And he's then moved further back to the main boot floor section, getting that all clamped in. But I think that's all clamped up at the moment. Yeah, that's all just pushed up in place at the moment. But he's been fabricating the boot floor So that is it's basically a flat panel, but with various reinforcements in it. Tom kind of conjured up a plan for that when he did the over axle forward section on the Project 1 Escort, the T-shaped sort of deep rib that he put in that, and then the joggled triangle sections to reinforce it, and then he kind of mirrored that as the principle of that for reinforcing the boot floor, which was a nice sort of creative way to do it, and it looks neat. So Sam's basically done the same on this, copied the other car on this car. So he's been using the Pels nibbler to put in the forms into that. He's put the T-shape in with the beading tool in the Pels nibbler, and then he's used a mixture of the bead roller and the Pels machine to put the joggles into the bottom of the boot floor there and get all that lined up. He's just got to do a bit of metal finishing, drop that back out and do a bit of metal finishing on that. Some of the edges are a little bit rough where he's put the shapes in. It does distort the panel, and you have to use the shrinker to pull to basically get the panel back to shape. And there's a couple of areas that just need finishing off, and then that's ready to weld in. Then he's also now doing the rear parcel shelf. We've just CNC plasma cut the blank for the main parcel shelf section, and then he's cutting the two sides, putting the folds on those, getting them welded into the shell, and then making the reinforcers that sit on top of the rear turrets that flange those onto the parcel shelf to tie them in, and then getting the parcel shelf all welded into those as well. In fact, and also getting the reinforcing sections put into that. So yeah, that's all coming together quite well, and we'll be pretty much up to the end of the major sort of structural sheet metal, I would say, well certainly by Christmas, but basically by the end of, we're Thursday today, by end of play tomorrow, Friday, we'll pretty much be getting into the latter stages of the structural sheet metal. There's a few little bits to do on the outer ends of the bulkhead that'll still need to be done, a few other bits, but yeah, we're really getting quite close now. In the background, there's some work going on with the wheel arches. Andy Hall, who is we've mentioned him before because he did the sheet metal work on the Series 2 E-Type Jaguar that Carl will have mentioned in the first half of this episode. I would imagine he'll have mentioned that anyway. I haven't spoken to Carl, so I don't know if he's mentioned it, but I imagine he probably has. But the blue, metallic blue E-Type that we're working on, Andy Hall did the metal work on that body shell. Well, he's doing the initial shaping on the first set of wheel arches on the hammer forms for these, and then we should be doing the second set. But he's working on the first set to get us a little bit further down, to get us moved on a little bit more rapidly. So because we're just struggling to keep up with the workload. So he's getting the first set done for the Project 1 Escort, because really now the wheel arches are going to become the hold up on proceedings. We can't do any of the panel fit up until they're done, and we can't fabricate the inner arches till the outer arches are done. So that's going on in the background alongside all the other work. Moving on with things that are happening here, Tom has been working on the finalising of the bits of the dash. You'd have noticed that the dashes have sort of looked somewhere close to complete, but not quite complete for a while. That's because A, they needed final welding in, but B, the instrument binnacle we didn't have a completely firm plan for. The original plan, which was why the apertures you'd have noticed in previous episodes around here, around the binnacle area, looked a little bit sort of crude. I'd say rough and ready, that'd be an exaggeration, but they weren't a particularly precise cutout, because they didn't need to be, because originally, when we built Gordon's car, Stu fabricated the binnacle in sheet metal, and it basically had a sheet metal skirt that went around that covered that area of the dash and pulled up against the upholstered upper dash panel, and then just had a very slight clearance. Once that was done up, had a slight clearance to the metalwork on the lower part of the dash, because this part is metal, upper part is upholstered pad. The plan has now developed a little bit on here, in that when we step back from that, obviously that was built as a one-off car. Here we're building two in parallel, and the instruments are going to be slightly different. There's a number of other differences. We concluded, actually, with the benefit of sort of hindsight now, actually it would make more sense to machine the binnacle section that goes in here and carries the instruments from billet. just because of the detail involved and the time taken to fabricate it, would actually be more economically viable to do that in billet, and it would enable us to do all the design exactly as we want it without the constraints of being able to make it in sheet metal. So we're doing those in billet. That then necessitates a hole that is a nice clean fit on the billet part. The billet part will still overlap it, but it means that we've got a fixed size piece that's going to be going in there, because that's going to be machined and we're going to draw it on CAD. So in order to do that, I've drawn the aperture in CAD, and we've then made a little hammer form, and then Tom has shaped and hammer formed these flanges to go that are in the exact size of the piece that needs to go in. Well, it's the exact size less a little bit of clearance of the piece that's got to go in here, and he's then shaped those, say we've CNC plasma cut out a piece of 6mm plate with the correct profile on it. He's then hammer formed them onto that, then put the little kink in to match the kink line in the dash, and then done various bits of trimming, and we had to extend it slightly and a bit of faffing about. But basically he's made those sections to go in, TIG welded those in, metal finished them. He's metal finished this one. He's just in the process of metal finishing the one on the other car. We'll touch on that in a minute. So yeah, that's what Tom's been up to on this car. At that point, we will move on to the Churchill Jag, where Stu has been beavering away on bits I can actually point at this time. We've moved on a little. So working on the front end, chiefly the internal parts of the front end on here, basically fabricating the front end support structure and the inner parts of this lower aperture, such that we add the structure to the front of the car, but also allow air to get into the front of the car and maximise the amount of air we can pull into the engine bay. So with a view to that, Stu's fabricated a raked lower cross member, if you like, that actually acts as a bit of an air scoop underneath the front of the car. You won't see it when the car's at ride height. It'll be totally invisible to anybody looking at the car, but it'll actually pull quite a lot of air up and into the front of the car and into the radiator area. And it'll just mean that just maximises the amount of air we can pull in, but it also doubles as the front support structure of the car and ties the chassis rails together and does, it's just generally a structural part. He's then been finishing off there's some rust repair on the very front end of the chassis rails, so he's got that finished off, and then remade the very front section in conjunction with doing the rust repair, remade the front section of those rails to tie into that front cross structure, and again maximise the frontal area for the air to actually get in through. So that's all looking really nice. That's a really neat little wire-edged edge underneath there that he's done to finish that part, folded over and wire-edged. He's then also wire-edged the lower part of the front panel for the aperture there. So that aperture's all getting towards complete now, and I believe he's now working, on the end structure of this sort of scoop area. He's working on the end structure where that ties into the lower part of the inner wing. It's just basically the outer face of the chassis rail, if you like, to finish all that area off and get all that tidied up. So he's just working on that at the minute. I'm just looking at there's some cardboard aided design going on with the structure there, and Stu's doing some cardboard templates for the end sections of the inner wing face of those chassis rails to get all that lot tied up. That's all coming together really quite nicely. It's a really, really, really lovely piece of fabrication he's done there to just get the air in without being obtrusive on the outside of the car. So yeah, that's all coming together. That's about where we're at, isn't it? I haven't missed anything great out, have I? I'm really good at missing things that you've done. Oh yeah, here we go. We can wave a piece. I'm going to wave a piece at camera here. Here we go. I'll put my cup down. Look. So Stu's working on at the moment, just to prove we don't draw everything on a computer. When we only need one for each side, and they're basically unique parts. There's cardboard aided design, which is the front of the chassis rail, and then the actual steel piece, which Stu's just knocking up at the moment from the cardboard, and these will be welded in one each side to cap the outer face of the rail off and join onto the inner wing. So that's the final piece of the jigsaw of that front cross member, is where it ties in to the inner wing section just behind here. That I can't really show on camera, but it ties in, and that's the lower section of that, which then comes up to the rear of this front valance. So yeah, that's all coming together very nicely. So yeah, that's all looking good. Moving on from there, we'll swing by the Escort, the Project 1 Escort, where there's so much going on. I'm bound to forget all sorts of parts of it. Bobby's firing on with all sorts of jobs on this. he's been running the provisions for the brake pipes, front and rear. So he's routing the front pipe, sorry, the front to rear brake pipe has been routed down the chassis rail that side. One of the areas where things are a little bit tight is on the chassis rail where it kicks down the swan neck on the bulkhead. To run the brake pipe on the inner face, the transmission side of the chassis rail, we'll put it very close to the exhaust. We don't want to do that. In terms of, there's no direct safety risk of doing that in terms of the damage to the pipe or fire or anything like that. But the issue is that it would heat up the brake fluid a lot, and under certain circumstances we're a bit concerned about the amount of heat input into the brake system. So we wanted to get some distance there. So we're actually running the brake pipe, the front to rear pipe. It's been run on the outside of the chassis rail on the near side of the car. Run down, then we're actually running it through the chassis rail. There's already a datum hole through the chassis rail down there. There's already a companion hole, as Ford call them, through the chassis rail. So he's actually sleeved that and put a bulkhead point in the middle of that companion hole, so that we can put the brake pipes through a bulkhead fitting through the middle of the chassis rail and then carry it on. So it's just screwed both sides of there. The union comes out as well, so it's not like an unserviceable part. And there's a lock nut inside the chassis rail, well, inside the tube within the chassis rail, accessible with a socket. So the brake pipe comes down through the rail and then carries on the inner face of the rail, on the transmission face of the rail down. And you may recall from previous episodes where the transmission cross member is, there's two tubes each side let through that new rail section, the transverse rail that supports the transmission. There's two tubes put through that, and on that side, on the near side of the car, one of those is accommodating the front to rear brake pipe, which passes through there, and the holes are big enough to get the unions through once they're swaged. In tandem with that, he's also been working on the fuel pipe routing, and that ties in nicely because on this side of the car, on the off side of the car, those two tubes that go through that chassis rail are also big enough to accommodate an inline straight AN6 type fuel union. And on this side of the car, he's then routing those fuel pipes and putting the provisions in for mounting those against the transmission side of the chassis rail, if you like, on the off side of the car. Lots of nitty-gritty bits basically going on. They're the main bits Bobby's been doing there. He's also been working on putting the bosses on the inner wings on the front of the car for mounting the wiring looms that go to the front, for mounting the front brake pipes, which come from they're going to go through the top of the footwells, if you like, at the top of the bulkhead, inside the area covered by the outer front wing at the top. The brake pipes will come out of there, and then it's only a very short journey from there to the rear face of the front suspension support tower, if you like, the turret, the flanges on the inner wing that carry the top mount. So the pipes will come out of the bulkhead, along on a little mount to the inner wing, and then onto the back face of that tower, and then travel down that tower and then go through the tower to a 90-degree bulkhead union, and then from there on a flexi hose to the caliper. So he's been putting the bosses and mountings in place, both sides, for those brake hoses to connect to. And as I say, also the wiring looms for the front panel, for basically the cooling fan, the front lights and etc., horn and anything else that's mounted in the front of the car. The wiring looms for those are going to come again through the top of the footwell, under the bit area sheltered by the outer wing, travel along, and then they're going to go up and be mounted to the back of the inner wing top rail section. The mounting bosses along there. So again, Bobby's been getting those bosses in place so that we can put either P-clips or Stealth clamps. Scott's been very busy doing some aluminium fabricating. One of the problem areas, I wouldn't say it's a problem area, it's one of those, I think is the best way of describing it. You're going to have to do some cuts here because I'm waffling on here. I'm trying to think of the best way to describe it. One of the skill gaps we have, and it's not through lack of skill on part of me or any of the guys, is aluminium fabrication. We just don't really do enough of it. And the problem I had is now the problem that Scott has. Scott's extremely good TIG welder. In fact, what all the guys are really, they're all very good. But Scott's been doing quite a lot of really neat TIG fabrication recently, like the tunnel top and various other things. Does quite a lot of steel fabricating, so you kind of keep your hand in very well doing that. And it means that obviously your quality standards just gradually keep creeping up. They never tend to creep down. The problem with aluminium is that because we tend to do a whole lot of it and then none for quite a while and then quite a lot again, is that you hit that point of frustration where the first few bits you do, no matter how much scrap practice you do first, your first few welds are never as good as the last few you do. And Scott's been doing some aluminium fabricating, and he's been quite enjoying being able to do a few hours of it, so that actually his the quality is really good. It's good, there's nothing wrong with it. I mean, to be fair, compared to a lot of car builds out and a lot of stuff on the market, his initial welds are very good, but the quality always goes up and the standard always goes up through the job. But anyway, all of that's an aside. He's been doing the aluminium fabricating for the oil cooler mountings into the bottom of the radiators. We bought some off-the-shelf radiators on the grounds that we know, because we've used them before, we know what the mountings were like, and we knew that they were the correct mountings for the car. Now, we had a bit of a palaver with those radiators, and the first set we were sent was scrap. The second set we were sent are not scrap. However, interestingly, the welding standard on them is nowhere near as good as the welding standard, going back to the previous, tying into the previous little conversation, is that Scott's welds, the starting ones were similar to the ones that were already on the radiators. The final ones are miles better than the ones that are on the radiators, and actually by the time he's finished fabricating these bits in, kind of wish we'd kind of done all the radiator fabrication ourselves, because it would have been neater, but hey ho, there we go. Yeah, Scott's been fabricating in the plates, the machine plates, which are TIG welded into the bottom tank of the radiator. It necessitates extending part of the bottom tank of the radiator so that we can weld machine plates in, which then accept another bolt-in billet plate with an O-ring seal on it, which then carries what's an oil cooler of a GM origin. It's what's used on the General Motors V6 engines, and it actually bolts into the centre of the V on the V6 engines. And they were a nightmare in the General Motors application. They were known for being a problem area, but they weren't really a problem area from the point of view of the cooler itself. They were a problem area from the point of view of the aluminium plate that mounted the cooler rotting away, because they were a poor quality casting. So that was the fundamental problem, was a water leak rather than anything to do with the oil cooler. I think the oil coolers eventually failed due to corrosion as well, but again, that was basically lack of maintenance. From our point of view, they're great because they're a nice little small compact unit way of getting a good heat transfer to the oil, warm the oil up quickly, basically go inside the temperatures of the water and oil quite quickly on warm up, but then keep the oil temperature down nicely under load. So we've been, Scott's been welding those, the fixtures for those into the bottoms of the radiators. He's got all that done now, and he's made a really neat job of that. You have to pardon all my waffling on about it, but basically he's done a really neat job, you'll see from the footage. So that's what Scott's been on with. I'm trying to think if I've missed anything else out. I don't think I have. There's a lot of detail work, so it's quite hard for me to keep my head around all the things going on, but I think that's pretty much where we're at with this. We're getting into the very final stages of the nitty-gritty bits on this car, with the exception of, as I mentioned earlier, the wheel arches. That's the real next major chunk that we need to get done on this so that we can get the shell finished, is getting the wheel arches grafted in. And so that's the sort of major thing that we need to get dealt with, that and reskinning these doors, reskinning the new doors with some new door skins that don't have waves in the bottom. So yeah, that's pretty much where we're at on the Escort. So we'll wander on to the body shop where we can look at a few acres of sheet metal that is getting well through the stages of the primary filler work now. We've had a few ups and downs with panel gapping and moving of doors and jiggling things around and all of the usual body fit up fun and games. But it's getting pretty close now. The doors, we're pretty happy with the fit of everything. Everything goes on the car pretty much as it should. The filler work, there's been a fair bit in the wings, as you can, it's pretty evident what there is. You can see it on show here. Bit in the quarters. The quarters aren't perfect, so there's a little bit of filler in them. Not great, not swathes of it, but a reasonable bit needed to get them levelled out. They're such a big, long, flat panel that they do need quite a lot of work to get them absolutely arrow straight. But they are getting pretty close now. I think we're not a million miles away from polyester now, are we, Gaz? We're getting close. Yeah, some point next week. I think that I'm signing off before Christmas. I think we'll be in polyester for Christmas. I think will be the likely scenario. So yeah, it's all coming together pretty well now. It's pretty self-evident where we're at. Lots of dust, lots of sanding, lots of rubbing down of very, very large panels. A little bit still to do on the roof. There's some work needed on the roof yet. There's a couple of dinks in the roof. There's a little bit of a skim been done in it. Oh, you don't? I'd say, I haven't really looked at there. Yeah, the primary work's been done on the roof, but again, there's a little bit more needed. I think Gaz is just marking out at the moment for the trim holes. We've got to add 2 more holes into each quarter panel because the new quarter panels don't have the trim holes in. So Gaz has got to add, there's 2 holes to add to the quarter panel, and oh no, the hole is, have you done the holes in the wings?
That was already there.
Oh, that was already there. I think where the wings have been repaired, one of them's lost its hole, so that needs adding in. So he's just adding those in. There's some clips that pop into those holes, and then the side trims go on. The linear positions of the clips don't matter because they're in a sliding track on the trim. But there's a very large trim that goes all the way down the side of the car that covers over the sill, and that's got a set of clips in it. As I say, we've got to add those in. So a couple of little bits like that need finishing off. A bit of nitpicking in terms of filler work and some more blocking, but we're getting pretty close. There's a little bit of tidying we want to do around the wheel arches as well, where some of the repairs have put some little wobbles in the arch lips that want grinding back and tidying up. But yeah, it's getting very, very close now to the stages of polyester, and then more dust and more sanding. So yeah, it's just
should be done next year.
Yeah, well, there is that. Yeah, there's the statement of the year. It should be done next year. Yeah, hopefully. If it's not, there's a problem. Yeah, so we're making pretty good progress on that. It's all going pretty well. Just very dusty, and just the surface area. Just the I think there was a comment on Instagram, wasn't there? The great sandpaper shortage of 2023, yeah, which sums it up really. You forget how quickly you just get through consumables on a car of this stage. You know, a little bit of filler work still consumes a lot of filler, and a little bit of sanding consumes an awful lot of sandpaper, and yeah, quite a lot of tennis elbow. So it's, but the guys are getting there pretty well with it now. It's just a vast area to cover. So yeah, watch this space next week for where this one's going to sign off for Christmas, and then moving on from there, we are going to show a pardon me, a little arrival that we now have back from KS Composites. We have received the Jensen Body shell. That has returned, is now just plopped loosely onto the rolling chassis. I hasten to add, it's not fitted in any way. It's plopped loosely over, but as usual with KS Composites, they've done a beautiful job, and it's here, and it fits as far as we can tell, and everything's done as we'd hoped and expected it to be done. And compared to the original Jensen body, I haven't got a direct weight comparison because we don't have the other body here. It would be interesting to know, but I would say certainly considerably less than a quarter of the weight of the original. I would say possibly something of the order of a sixth of the weight of the original body. Vastly lighter. This is, one person can just stand under this and sort of pick it up with ease. You know, there's no weight to it at all. Whereas the original body, you needed 2 people just to be able to lift it. So it's there's a huge difference in weight. With the glass has been offered up, and that all looks pretty promising. That all looks, there's no direct terror about the fit of the glass in it. That all looks to fit correctly. So yeah, moving on from that, I think KS getting on with they've done the parcel shelf, which is in there. I think we're just waiting for the side skirts to come back. From KS, and then we'll be doing in the new year, fairly early in the new year, we'll be doing a fit up of the body to the chassis, getting that all set up and level so that some of the KS guys can come out and do the wet lay. They're going to do a wet lay lamination of a return for basically from the bottom of the wheel arch, the flange that goes all the way around the wheel arch to the boot floor, and then all the way around the boot floor, and then all the way over that wheel arch. That's all going to be laminated onto the inside of the shell. And rather than doing that as a separately moulded piece that's bonded into the shell, they're actually going to wet lay that to the inside of the carbon, prep the inside of the carbon, and mould that directly in situ, as being an easier way to achieve the result with that, rather than trying to make a mould tool to do that, which would be really challenging. We couldn't really take a mould off the original shell there. That was pretty much impossible. Certainly to be able to get it located accurately was almost impossible. So it made, and the flange that was on the original shell was so thick that we couldn't mould off the guys couldn't. We knew it was going to be impossible to mould off the back of it, because there was no relationship really between the back of the flange and the front of the flange, because it varied in thickness so much. So that's going to be laid up in situ. So that's the sort of New Year's job, is get that done, get KS out to do that. Once we've set the body shell level and got it all lasered and checked that we're happy with the positioning, get the side skirts on. Then once we're happy that everything fits, that doors fit, side skirts fit, everything lines up nicely, we'll retrial the fiberglass bonnet buck, i.e. the original fiberglass bonnet that we've done some work on. We'll put that back on and the nose cone section on, get all that together, make sure it all fits, make sure that we're happy with all the gaps. Once we're happy with all that, then the bonnet will go off to KS to be moulded to make the carbon bonnet, and the boot lid we'll retry the fiberglass boot lid back on the cut now on the carbon shell, make sure we're happy with the gaps, make sure everything works, that we're happy with how everything's going to work, and then that will also go off and we'll have the carbon boot lid made. At that point will be the only section we're not planning to do in carbon is the very nose section, because it's very complicated. To do that, the mould tool is really quite sophisticated. There's quite a number of plugs required, and even when obviously there is quite a lot of budget involved, one has to draw a line at the point when the budget becomes more than an awful lot of money, which is what that front plug would become. It would be an extremely complicated piece to do. So certainly at the moment, the plan is that will be staying fiberglass. But all the rest in carbon. Yeah, it's given us all quite a mental boost, really, in that we'd seen so much of the old fiberglass shell, which was poor quality 1960s fiberglass originally, that had been crashed at least twice and repaired badly, and then had been modified by us with lots of wet lay fiberglass in various places, with bits cut out of it, with a Webasto sunroof that had been crudely cut into it, with so many bits that were basically bodged on it. We just weren't, it wasn't a nice thing to have around. We were just all pretty much fed up with the sight of it, because it was just a big heavy lump of badly stuck together fiberglass and filler, being blunt. Now seeing all that turned into a single nice, clean, thin, lightweight piece of carbon fibre that's the exact shape we wanted it to be is a real mental boost, both for the customer and for us. It's a rekindled enthusiasm, I guess. Not that we lost it a lot, but as I say, that the drain on enthusiasm from looking at that cobbled up lump of fiberglass has now all gone away. Now we've got this nice big lump of big piece of clean, shiny carbon fibre to look at. So yeah, good. We're all looking forward to this one moving ahead in the new year, and this is going to be just an incredible car once it's done. Really, absolutely incredible piece. So on that note, I think it's time to say goodbye. So we'll see you again next week.